Today I'm meeting with Lisa Stockdale, the Director of the Office of Recovery Services here in Utah, and we're actually doing this from your office. Thank you so much for letting us be here.
No problem.
And we're going to talk today about a question that many people have that you get at your office and that a lot of other people want to ask that may not know where to turn or may not know what to believe.
Okay.
And so we're going to briefly talk about the ways to do what?
To establish an order.
Okay, to establish a child support order. So, what are the ways that you can do that? Or actually, before we do that, let's get into the information that is needed so that an order can be established.
Okay, some of the key pieces of information that our office needs to have on hand before we can establish a child support order is we need to know where the parents are. Those parents are going to have to be served with some legal documents that explain their rights and what we're trying to establish. And we need to make sure that they're actually going to receive those documents. So knowing where we can find both parents is critical to being able to proceed. Once we feel like we know where those parents are, we need to dig in and find out what their income is. We really need to know if they're verifiable wages. We don't want to just go on hearsay. We'd like to get tax records if we could, or information from employers, or sometimes there's information in databases such as the unemployment database here in Utah that we can use, and those are all considered verifiable wages. If all else fails on income, Utah law states that we use federal minimum wage as a default wage if we can't verify something else.
If they're capable of working?
If they're capable of working.
Do they have to show that they're disabled in some way, or do they just claim that?
If they believe that the federal minimum wage standard doesn't apply to them, it is important to provide us with some documentation that shows that they are not capable of working at that rate.
And this may not make sense to some people, but why can't you just have somebody submit a sworn statement or an affidavit? Why would you need to look at some objectively verifiable source?
You can say anything in a sworn statement, unfortunately.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like a lot of people don't understand that. It's like, look, you're asking them to take you at your word, and there are plenty of people who are dishonest when it comes
Exactly.
to child support issues, whether it's how much or how little they make.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is a huge financial commitment. We understand that. And so it's important to have that kind of objective approach to deciding what the income is.
Because you want to make you want it to be an accurate amount.
Yes.
Based upon what the law says.
Exactly.
Child support is calculated.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now this final one gets a little complicated, and that's that we need to make sure that we know where the paternity issue stands for these people, these parents and this child. Is this father legally established as the father? And if not, that's fine. Our office can handle that, but we do need to know if that's one of the issues that we're addressing in this. Okay. So we're going to need to know things like if the child was born while the parents were married, because in Utah there's a presumption of parenthood or paternity at the time that the child is born if their parents are married at that time.
And let me stop you there. Now, you might say, those of you that are watching, like, well, duh. I mean, if we're married and the child is born, of course the child is going to be my child. But remember, you could be a married couple that's separated. You could be a married couple where one of the spouses is unfaithful or something like that. So,
exactly.
And this is interesting because this question comes up a lot.
Yes.
If you're married and the wife bears a child by another man, you, nevertheless, the husband of that wife, are deemed to be presumptively the father of that child.
Yes, you are presumed to be that father, but it is a rebuttable presumption.
Right. So it's not something where it's like, sorry, your wife can get impregnated by as many men as she wants and have as many kids by other men, and you're going to have to take care of them.
Right.
No. But if you don't challenge paternity,
exactly,
you are presumed to be the father of that child, and you will be responsible for supporting that child.
So it's very important to take care of these issues up front and as early as possible, so that the right person ends up with the obligation.
What if I'm not sure if this child is mine or not? What should I do?
Oh, genetic testing.
Right. Okay, so in other words, just because you may not know, maybe your wife swears that she didn't step out on you, and that this child is yours. But if you're saying, well, wait a minute, all of our children are blonde and blue-eyed except for this child, or all of this, you might say, well, there's no shame. You won't be punished for questioning that, even if it turns out that you were mistaken.
Correct.
But like you say, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any doubt, resolve it up front.
Yes, it's much better to resolve these issues earlier in the process rather than later. And genetic testing, the prices have come down. It's easy to do. It's just a buccal swab inside of the cheek to gather some cells. It's not a blood test. So it's very much worth pursuing if there's any question.
Okay, so we talked about there's a presumption of paternity if the couple is married.
Right.
There's the genetic testing.
Genetic testing, yes, that can lead us toward the correct order. But then there's also something called a voluntary declaration of paternity. It's an easy process. It's available in all states, and it's available here in Utah, where parents can go in if they agree that they are both the parents, and they can sign a document and simply voluntarily say, I am the father, and she agrees that this is the father of this given child. And they file that with the Office of Vital Records and Statistics, and then it amends the birth certificate and actually adds the father's name to that birth certificate and legally establishes the paternity issue for all purposes.
Now, this may be a little bit of minutia, but I think it's worth asking. You probably have dealt with this. In fact, I know you've dealt with this many times. So somebody who says, I'm not the father of this child, but I've met this woman when she was pregnant or shortly after the child was born, and I love her so much that I've decided to say I'm the father because they're concerned about the illegitimacy of the child or stigma, but he's not.
Okay.
And then they have a falling out. So does the fact that the voluntary declaration of paternity, does that establish it permanently, or could you still say if you've done it at the ORS level, you could still challenge it?
If it's a voluntary declaration of paternity, first of all, I need to caution everybody that that is signed under penalties of fraud. It's very serious to just sign that document kind of as a backdoor adoption process.
And even if for all the right reasons, all the
I mean, those are very charitable reasons, and I understand the feeling that you'd want to take care of a child and form this family, and this is a very simple way, it appears, to do that. But nonetheless, it is fraud. So I would never, ever encourage that to happen. If that does get challenged down the road, it is a court issue to challenge a declaration of paternity, and it would have to be by some very convincing evidence, and you're going to have to try to prove fraud has occurred in causing you to sign that document. And so it may not be overturned.
So
that would be up to the courts.
There's a lot of people that think, well, we can kind of play fast and loose with these rules. And the answer is, well,
please don't.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. But just because you've done that doesn't mean you're going to be able to turn that around later, or try to correct something where if you were misleading the state to begin with, the state may hold you to that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So now we have dealt with ways to apply, right? Well, actually, we're going to get to ways to apply. We've talked about establishing paternity. We've talked about some of the ways that we can prove that, some of the dangers you have in playing fast and loose. Now let's talk a little bit about the ways that we can apply for ORS help.
If you decide you need services from the Office of Recovery Services, there's an application that's available on the website, and that's ors.utah.gov. And along the left-hand side of our current website, there's a link that says ORS Application for Services. If you can actually complete that application online, and the benefit to completing it online and submitting it online is that is instantly in our office. And now it actually automatically opens the case so that the child support worker is looking at an open case on our system to quickly evaluate what else is needed. You have the option, of course, online of printing that application and mailing it in. We'll still get it, we'll still work it. And you have the option of requesting a printed application from our office. And one of the easiest ways to do that is on our phone system. You can dial 801-536-8500, go to our general information section on the phone system, and there's a section that's called Applying for Services. One of those questions will give you an option to give us your address, and we will mail an application to you.
Okay.
One important thing, though, is it's not just the application. As you read the application, you'll find that there's a list of supporting documentation that our office needs to receive in order to accurately process your case and move forward. So even though you send in the application, be sure to send in the follow-up documentation because our office won't be able to proceed without that.
Okay. Now let's talk about trying to find the person you're collecting against, because there may be situations where you know where both people are. I can tell you where I am and the person I'm seeking the support order from or the support money from. I can find that person as well. I know where that person works, lives, or something like that. What if I'm one of those parents who has a child and I want to collect support for the child, but I don't know where the other parent is?
That's actually very common. So what we would ask you to do is provide us as much information as you have about that other parent. Social Security numbers are key in this process. That's the best piece of information that you can give us. But any other information always turns out to be helpful as well. We put that in our computer system, and actually it's a huge automated database that goes on continually looking through various sources across the country and even some international now, trying to find any hint of where that person might be working. And we'll just keep combing those sources until we actually find something that we can follow up on.
So I don't have to provide ORS with the identity of the employer or the address of the parent if I don't have it.
If
in
you
other
don't,
words, you won't
right.
slam the door saying, sorry, we can't help you until you tell us where to find this person.
We will take any information you have and we will go as far as possible with it. Now, after a certain number of years, if your information doesn't lead us anywhere, the federal regulations do allow us to temporarily close that case until you can bring some new piece of information into us. So there is a time period that we will look, and then if we hit so many dead-end roads and it's not enough information, we would just ask you to come back when you find something else.
Now, I'm an attorney, and a lot of people will come to me saying, I want to collect child support, but I don't have a lot of money, or I don't want to hire a lawyer for some other reason. And so, ORS, are you tied in directly with the courts?
The courts are definitely a key part of our process, but
Is
we
it the
also
only one?
no, it's
Okay.
not.
So see, a lot of times people think, well, I don't want to pay a court filing fee, and I don't want to have to go to court. I don't want to have to fight and do a number of other things like that through the courts. People are sometimes surprised to learn that ORS has another way of seeking.
Right.
It's not just, well, call ORS and then we'll see you in court.
Right.
What is that other way?
It's under the Utah Administrative Procedures Act, which we shorten and call UWAPA. And it allows us to do, it's an informal process for setting orders, but it's just as binding as a court order. So we are able to handle a lot of these processes just here in our office with people who are trained in order establishment. And as long as your situation is fairly straightforward, we can issue an order here in our office without ever actually going into the courthouse.
And we'll talk a little bit about it. Like, okay, so I didn't have to go into the courthouse to get the ORS administrative order, but what if somebody wants to challenge that through ORS? Do they have to go to court?
You know, they can have initial challenge procedures through our office. There's an administrative hearings office, which is a little bit of a step up, but still administrative.
And still out of court.
Yes, and still out of court to hear some of these things. But ultimately, the courts have jurisdiction over this if you're not satisfied with the responses you're getting through the administrative process.
Okay. Now, we jumped ahead a little on that, but I just figured we'd talk about the whole administrative process. So we can go through the administrative process that's not in court. There's still some checks on that to make sure people are being honest. You're still being
Yes.
rigorous. You're just not going to court.
Right.
And is there a filing fee you have to pay to get ORS to collect child support?
No.
Okay.
There's no fee for the initial collection if we're successful in collections. There are some fees assessed against payments that we bring in, and then there's an annual fee charged by the Federal Office of Child Support.
But no upfront filing fee?
Absolutely not.
No pay-to-play kind of thing, so
No,
to speak?
no.
All
The
right.
office has chosen to cover that in-house.
Okay, so now you can go through ORS administratively, but you can also go to court and without ever having to deal with ORS originally.
Yes.
Is that correct? Now, briefly, why would anyone want to do that? Why wouldn't everybody want to go through ORS?
I don't know. Why wouldn't they? Now, some situations really are fairly complicated. The divorces can get messy, and custody issues can get very confusing or very complicated and heated. And our office isn't equipped for that. We're equipped for the very basic, run-of-the-mill, let's set up your child support and move forward type situation. However, if there's something more complicated, the courts are always there for you to help you process through that and obtain the right order for your situation.
Are there any other methods?
There are. There's another one that is through our office, and it's under the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act. One of the issues we have to consider is, are all of the parents and players in this situation here in Utah? And if not, do we have jurisdiction over them or the right to pursue them wherever they are living and pursue that child support order? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes those other parents don't have enough of a tie to Utah that Utah has legal jurisdiction over them. And in that case, we have the ability to ask the state where that other parent lives to help us. They do have jurisdiction because the parent is living there. And if we agree to submit to their jurisdiction, they can actually help us establish the order for the parent that's here in Utah. And that's just an interstate process, and there are forms that we are able to process with that other state and establish a support order for the parents.
So we're here in Salt Lake City. Is that where everybody has to go? Is everything done through Salt Lake City if people are asking for ORS help?
As far as the public perception is, yes, you're going to be communicating largely with Salt Lake City. We have a central phone line that's based here. We have our mail room, so all of the mail comes to Salt Lake City. We do have some branch offices, but you will be directed specifically if you should appear in one of those branch offices during the order establishment process.
And the reason I ask that is it preferable, does ORS prefer that people come into the branch offices to talk about things or to provide documents? I mean, granted, you can do things online, but if somebody says, well, I've got a bunch of paperwork that I don't have access to a scanner or something like that, do you prefer that people deal with the branch offices, or would you prefer that they put everything in an envelope and mail it?
The best system is actually to put things in the mail and send them in, because that way we're able to log them in our imaged document file system. They get stamped, they're date stamped, they're tracked from the moment they get here. Time frames start at that point, and we're able to disperse them the same day out to the exact caseworker who should receive them. Whereas if you take it into the office, they're really going to just send it to the central office to be imaged into our filing system.
Okay.
Yes. We will accept the paperwork at our offices, of course we'll accept it. But the best method is to get it straight to Salt Lake as quickly as you can.
Well, what if I was just too embarrassed to tell you that the real reason I wanted to ask about going into the branch offices is because I have lots of questions, and that even after I watched this video, I still was a little unclear. Are people welcome in the offices?
People are always welcome in our offices. One thing that may surprise them, though, is because we are spread throughout the state, they're often going to be asked to speak to somebody who is specialized either on their specific case or in that specific area that may not be located in that office. And so it may still be a telephone conversation in one of our interview rooms.
Okay.
But we'll get them to the right people, and we'll get them some help while they're in our offices. They're always welcome.
Now, there's no way for you to predict exactly how long this process takes,
No.
because you don't know how complete the application will be, you don't know how difficult it will be to find the other parent, and things like that. But in general, once everything is received by your office,
Okay.
do you have an idea of what it would normally take?
Well-
Now, remember, don't hold anyone to these. And we're not doing that because
Yeah.
we want to sound like flakes. I'm just saying that you can't predict that.
You're right.
But in general, if people have cooperated with your office, how long does that process take?
Well, let's do this. Let's talk about the goals that the federal government sets for us. So the goal that the federal government sets for us to receive all of the documents from the clients and have the case open on our system is within 20 days. So that's a pretty fast time frame to receive everything, review it, make sure we have everything, do some communication with the client, and get the case open.
Especially administratively,
Right.
that's lightning fast.
So those first 20 days are supposed to be dedicated to getting the case open and open accurately on our system, and that's their goal. If we need to establish an order, they want us to have most of those orders established within 180 days after that.
Okay.
So we're trying for 6 months in an establishment process, and we can hit that if we have all of the elements in place.
Okay, let's assume that I've successfully asked ORS to help me collect child support. Do they mail me a check? Do I get an ATM card? Do I have it direct deposited? How do I collect the money once it's collected by your office?
That's a good question. Utah law actually requires that you receive payments from our office electronically, and there are 2 methods for doing that. We can either direct deposit it into your bank account, or we have a Utah debit card, MasterCard, which we can issue to you, and it can be used at points of purchase if you just want to purchase directly with the funds that you've received from the Office of Recovery Services. If those are not possible, if you're not bankable or you don't have a Social Security number, we can issue a check, but that is the last method that we choose to use.
And only if the other 2 methods
Right,
won't work.
exactly.
You don't get to choose. If you can open a bank account,
We
you can't
need-
elect to have.
Right.
Is it a check, you say?
It is a check.
Okay.
But that's so subject to fraud that we would hope that everybody would understand that electronic is the safest way to receive your funds from our office.
Thank you very much. We hope this has been useful to you, and we're so grateful for you taking the time to explain this process to
No
us.
problem. I hope it's helpful.